Jaeden, I don't know if I say this every week, like, wow, what a week in AI. It felt like late 2023 was just every single YouTube channel started off with like, wow, what a week. But Jaeden, this week, my gosh. So peek behind the curtain, guys. Like Jaeden and I prep for this show. By the way, we have some other cool things that we're working on behind the scenes, which we'll share at some point. But one of the cool things about this show and sort of like doing it so regularly is you really can tell when there's like a spike and something crazy is going on. And that is this week. I don't even know where to begin, but I want to focus this episode, Jaeden, if you're down with this, and I didn't clear this with you before, but I want to sort of focus on the OpenAI stuff, right? Because I think there's been a lot of news all over the place, but with between Codex and Frontier, and you had told me that you're using Codex, and especially just because all over my Twitter feed is all Claude Code, Claude Code, Claude Code. So you have been messing around with this, and you have AIbox.ai, which we talked about in the last episode, which is phenomenal, guys. Go check it out. $19 a month. It's absolutely incredible what it does with the marketplace and everything. Check out AIbox. But Jaeden, you as a software guy, talk to me about Codex.
Yeah, so I was super stoked about this because as someone that heavily uses, not personally, but my company AIbox, we heavily use Claude Code for everything we do, developing the platform, and it's just made our lives a million times better. I mean, basically AIbox is competing directly with Google Opal, and there is no way in a million years we could compete directly with a Google product without Claude Code and these AI tools to speed us up, right? So I think we're at a really cool place for software. As far as the vibe coding things go, I've played around with tons of different tools. I've done a lot with Lovable. I built a whole podcast distribution company, podcaststudio.com, with Lovable, basically to test it out. It's like not a company. I don't tell anyone to sign up for it. I use it every day just for my own thing. But it's like, I think it's a really good indicator that literally anyone right now can build software. And if you're my only caveat to all of this, in my unprofessional opinion, because I'm not a software developer, is I think if you are not a developer, you can build software that's really good for you and maybe a handful of people. But when you want to scale the software, like you kind of do need to understand what's happening with the code and with security and with the database and the backend and all this kind of stuff. So that's my caveat on all of this. Codex specifically doesn't feel like it's a competitor to Lovable for no coders or some of the other tools that Google AI Studio is kind of coming out with. Codex is a direct competitor to Claude Code. And so I also, not a developer at all, but I did go download their recent macOS app and play around with it. And I'm sure I sound really dumb to anyone that's an actual developer, because I was like, I'd give it a screenshot of a page on AIbox that I was in the process of redesigning, and I'm like, hey, like redesign this page and like make it more friendly and whatever. It's kind of the same thing I tell Lovable to do all the time. And so it's like, okay, like I did it for you, and it like spits out this thing, and I'm like, okay, like where is it? Like, how do I see it? What does it look like? Because you have to know that when you're using something like Codex, you chat with it like ChatGPT, but on the side you're just gonna see code. And so it's like, well, I mean, you can click on this link here to this HTML file and it will show it to you. And I click that, and then it opens up in my browser, kind of like if you've ever accidentally downloaded a web page or accidentally downloaded an HTML file, it will open up in your browser and display. So there's probably a better way to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I clicked it, and it gave me a pretty good summary. Now, the one thing that I will say, contrasting this to something like Claude Code, when Claude Code does that, it is more interactive. So when I click a button, it can like move. There can be like some animations. There can be some like stuff. This was just a flat page. And probably me doing something wrong, or I didn't prompt it correctly, or whatever. I'm sure developers can get it to work. I feel like Claude Code is still a little bit ahead of Codex right now, based off of my testing and kind of what I've seen. But I think that it is the number one item on the hit list of OpenAI. And because OpenAI does have more users and they do have more money, I think that this tool is going to get comparative and maybe better than Claude Code. I mean, maybe that's going too far, but I think there's going to be a fierce competition right here between Codex and Claude Code in the future. I've been impressed with what it can do. I still think Claude Code is the king right now, though.
Yeah, this is, I mean, that tends to be, although I don't know if enough people have played with the new Codex yet, and I want to get into Frontier as well and sort of a little bit about what that is. But I know with our audience, and this is an overgeneralization, but like a lot of you are not developers, right? A lot of you are sort of just trying to figure this out, and which is why I love asking Jaeden to run through his process, because same thing for me. Like, what does this look like for us non-developers to try to create that? And Jaden, just sort of like a tiny sidebar as we're sort of like moving from Codex and then into Frontier as well, which I want to get your take on and help have you explain it to everybody. The thing that I posted about on LinkedIn about Codex specifically, right, was Sam Altman gave this tweet. I'm going to read it aloud because there's something really interesting about it. So it says, I'm very excited about AI. This is when they posted Codex. But to go off script for a minute, I built an app with Codex last week. It was very fun. And then I started asking it for ideas for new features, and at least a couple of them were better than what I was thinking of. I felt a little useless, and it was sad. And this sort of like started blowing up, right? But I thought this was really interesting, Jaden, and sort of speaks to the whole AI movement and the future of work. Just to sidebar this for a second, which was Sam Altman talking about that is interesting because what he's sort of like trying to get across is like, can you believe that now this thing is smarter than me? I was always the smartest guy in the room. And in a way, yeah, that's true. But what we miss here is that the only reason Sam Altman knew that those features were better than what he, then, like the only reason he was sort of able to judge the quality is because he's such a good coder. So I just want to kind of like put this out there as we're kind of like hearing, things about Codex, and you might be listening and being like, well, that's interesting, but what does it have to do with me? I'll tell you what it has to do with you. People who are coding know what good code looks like, right? So Jaden is sort of describing a situation where he's just looking at code and he doesn't know if it looks like good code or not. He just sort of has to like figure it out for himself. So when we say like AI is coming from this role or for this job or something like that, I would sort of say like hit the brakes a little bit on that. Yes, is that ultimately happening? Yeah, right. We can't stop technology, but the important part is that AI is very good at producing work, but it's not good at discerning. It's not good at judgment. It's not good at telling you like what's right and what's wrong. And so when Sam Altman is even saying that, I think what we're sort of like running into here is that you have to have some domain expertise, and that's a good thing for you in this AI world. Anyway, I always think it's interesting to sort of like pull back and sort of see why a developer tool is relevant to all of us. So number one, we can mess with it, but number two, it speaks to something about the future of work. But Jaden, talk to us a little bit about, if you had anything else on Codex, cool, but also like Frontier, because this was also getting a ton of press.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say on Codex that I forgot before, just talking to my CTO for AI Box, he was telling me about it. He said it's something that it's great at doing compared to Claude Code is multi-thread agents. So with Claude Code, you have one agent, you prompted it, it kind of spends a long time. He says like he'll spend hours writing up these really elaborate documents, giving it to it, and Claude Code will work on implementing, like his sheet or whatever. And then but you kind of have to wait there in the meantime while you work on other things, but like it's working on that project. With Claude Code, he said you have multiple threads, but he said with Codex, he said because Claude Code is better, he said he still will find himself ahead with one agent that does it really well versus 10 all at once. If it's even 10 or 20% not as good, because then you kind of have to go fix everything and it spends a lot more time. So, I mean, his thing was like, man, I'd prefer they would just spend more time making the one agent experience better than going multi-thread, but whatever. So I did think that was an interesting insight. But one other thing is that they committed $10 million in API credits to help with cyber defense. They want this to be a really high on cybersecurity and have this kind of preparedness framework, which is really important, I think, for Vibe coders. So that 100%. Is really cool.
Yeah, Frontier, you want to hit that?
Yeah, so Frontier I think is really interesting. We had a post from Sam Altman over on X where he said, today we're launching Frontier, a new platform to enable a lot of these companies. He said the companies that succeed in the future are going to make very heavy use of AI. People will manage teams of agents to do very complex things. So they introduced this whole tool called Frontier, where essentially it's all of your agents on, I mean, we call it agents, but really it's for companies to connect all of their data to OpenAI, and directly through their interface, you can have your agents, taking action for you. So kind of these like automations, but connected to your data using OpenAI, a lot of OpenAI frameworks. An example was like, answer sales queries, and it's tied directly into your sales data, and it's going and kind of doing things. It's connecting to Google Calendar, Salesforce, SAP, connecting to your Notion to go and update it to certain places. So it's like, and then you can set these automations to run on a regular basis. It's what a lot of tools are working on. And to be honest, even at AI Box, that's something we're working on with our automated, or with our AI automations and stuff. And so you can see N8N and Make and Bubble and Zapier, and like all these people are kind of playing a role, but I think OpenAI decided this is a big enough market. They should just jump in directly and compete where Like, we'll tie all your data. We are the software that does the thinking here. So we'll tie in all your data. You set up your automations on us. And then I think this is a massive way for them to lock in a lot of guaranteed like compute and usage,
Yep.
basically. Because if you
Hmm.
can have someone setting up an automation that's going to grab this data every single week at Monday at 2 p.m. for like a meeting, and throw it into a Google Calendar, so on the meeting everyone can see the data and discuss it. Like, first of all, that's amazing because a person doesn't have to do that. But I think it's a smart move on OpenAI's part because it's really, I mean, locking in more usage.
Yeah, to your point too, like the total addressable market with the TAM and the TAM as they call it, right? Like it's huge. I mean, this is like every company in the world is trying to do this, and now we're entering this new phase where it's not just software and everything like that, but it's really like managing agents. And when we talk about stock market dips and things like that around SaaS companies and everything like that, it's partially because of things like this, right? So if you're trying to kind of get your head around this, you may have this in your office or have kind of like heard of it, when you're talking about Microsoft's Agent 365 or Google Cloud or AWS or really the ones that have been more prominent these days, I feel like are like Salesforce Agentforce, which I've done some work with in the past and things like that. But anyway, all these systems are great. The thing is, people tend to be sort of stuck with like who they've worked with in the past, right? If you sort of like
Mhm.
trust this layer and this orchestration, all that kind of stuff, then you're kind of like going to go that. But now more and more organizations are really leaning into OpenAI. And if they feel like, oh, OpenAI is doing this, like, let's just sort of like, and it's already integrated into your calendar and everything else. OpenAI is trying to form that kind of company. And I love what you just said there, because OpenAI needs to build out its services, right? It can't just be ad business for revenue. And one of the things that OpenAI is at a huge disadvantage about, same with Anthropic, is they don't have a cloud. They don't have a cloud. Like they don't have like all this stuff. Like why is, when you look at like Microsoft and Google and AWS just like absolutely rolling in quarterly earnings, absolutely rolling in it. That's not because they have the best models. It's because like just so many people are using their cloud-based services and things like that. And so if OpenAI can create something which is clean and smooth and have something like that, they are, I think, actually going to be able to compete with like the Salesforces of the world. No?
Yep, 100%. And I think beyond Salesforce, because Salesforce is going to be really, drilled down on just sales stuff, which is a solid strategy. I mean, for businesses, right? Like if you have a niche, like to really dominate it. But I do think that there is the potential for a much bigger market if they can address like sales and marketing and HR and like every department.
Right.
Um, and I think, it's kind of interesting because there's, of course, like whenever you talk to like investors about any company or people building, like the advice is always like, don't try to boil the ocean, pick a lane, pick a niche, stick to it. And I think in OpenAI's case, because they kind of are just the general purpose, most popular AI model in the world that just has the most amount of users, it is the one case where beyond just picking one lane, like they really
Yeah,
can try to do
I agree.
everything.
Yeah.
Now, are they going to do everything really well? I mean, that's the question, right? Codex versus Claude Code. Claude Code is winning because that's like the bread and butter of Anthropic. That's what they spend all their time and energy on, and
Hmm.
so it's beating out Codex from OpenAI right now. So I mean, there is that argument, but there's also a ton of usage of Codex, and maybe if you get a ton of usage on 10 things, it's still going to be twice as much as if you just dominated one of those particular niches. So I
Yeah,
think it's
I
a
think
smart move on OpenAI.
I think that's fair. It's also like they can afford to fail fast. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like something like OpenAI in a way that Google can't. They can just sort of like try something. If it doesn't work, look, Google's always going to be sort of like the elephant in the room here, and same with Microsoft, same with AWS. But yeah, I like what OpenAI is doing here. I think it's actually really cool. Like, I mean, like try this. Like if you have 800 million eyeballs a week, why not give this a try? Listen, guys, there's so much more to talk about. Like, obviously, again, with some of this stuff, you may not want to kind of go in and try this. It may not be immediately applicable to you, but just understand that the ecosystems are changing and OpenAI is trying to own those ecosystems that you live in every day. Thank you for tuning into AI Applied. We're always grateful for you listening. If you would be open to leaving a rating and review, we absolutely love it. It's the best thing we get all week. And otherwise, we will see you on the next episode.